Good morning and welcome to the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors meeting for January 14th, 2020. We will begin with the closed session.
Item 1, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation, Calaveras residents against commercial marijuana v. County of Calaveras, Board of Supervisors of Calaveras County et al. Calaveras County Superior Court Case Number 19CV44446.
Thank you. Is there any public comment regarding this item? Seeing none. Before we go to closed session, Supervisor Mills has contacted me and he will be not joining us this morning. Thank you very much. We will return at 9 o'clock. Good morning and welcome back to the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors meeting for January 14th, 2020. We have nothing to report out from closed session. Is that correct?
You want me to read it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Item 1, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation, Calaveras residents against commercial marijuana v. County of Calaveras, Board of Supervisors of Calaveras County et al. Calaveras County Superior Court Case Number 19CV44446. There was no reportable action taken.
Thank you. Now we'll try to get back on calendar. Well, if you could please rise if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, will you please lead us?
Let us begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Announcements?
Announcements. This is a time for county staff to provide updates of upcoming county events that may be of interest to the public.
Thank you. Any Board of Supervisors? County staff? Seeing none.
Item 2, election of the 2020 Chair of the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you. Any discussion from the board? All right. Any public comment on this item? Happy New Year, Ms. Cora.
I'm sorry that one of the supervisors is missing on a very important vote like this, and I hope that you will consider doing something that makes a lot of sense, and it's a very important vote, and I pray that you make the right one.
Thank you. Further public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for, is there a nomination or a motion? Supervisor Stopper?
Sir, I would like to make a motion to subsequently move Marita Callaway, who is now vice chair, to chair.
Thank you. We have a motion for Supervisor Callaway to become chair of the Board of Supervisors. Is there a second to the motion? He's looking at you.
You're not going to second it?
No, I thought you would.
You thought I would?
I'd like you to.
I need to think about it for a while.
It's going to be a long meeting.
Can we come back to it? I'll second it.
We have a motion by Supervisor Stopper, a second by Supervisor Toffanelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 4, 0, 1 absent. Congratulations, Madam Clerk. Here you go, Marita.
Does that mean you buy lunch?
Oh, yes, it does.
That's another discussion.
Item 3, election of the 2020 Vice Chair of the Board of Supervisors.
I move, oh, I can't do that. Yes,
You can do whatever you want. You're the chair now.
it's true. Pardon? I would like one of my colleagues to nominate Ben Stopper for vice chair.
I nominate Ben Stopper for vice chair.
I'd like one of my colleagues to second that motion.
I don't know, the two of you,
You need to think longer on this one.
how does Mr. Stauber feel about being vice chair?
He has no options because I asked for the nomination.
I will second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second for Ben Stopper for vice chair. All in favor?
Public comment.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hey,
You know what
that's why
you're
they
doing
put the
yourself,
sticker
right?
right in front of me.
Is there any public comment on Mr. Stopper being vice chair?
I understand that you're going to do what you're going to do, but Mr. Stopper's campaign against Clyde Clapp was, in my opinion, in the gutter. And I do not believe that people should assassinate someone's character as the other supervisors was. I believe in love, and I believe in sometimes tough love, but I believe in love, and that didn't qualify for love. And that's the bar that I look to, and I hope that Mr. Stopper will consider what I've said. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Bring him back to the board for a vote. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moves on a 4-1 absent vote of the board. Thank you.
Clerk wants to take a break.
Yes. We're taking a break.
How long?
Thank you for your patience in allowing us to do our laundry. And I'm sure my colleagues will remind me how to run a board meeting if I don't do it. All right. I'd like to move to general comments. I'm so used to saying, so the clerk will have to remind me that she does it, not me. Madam Clerk.
General public comment. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the next order of business. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued as the last item of business in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of comments to be heard.
Are there any public comments on items not on the agenda? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mary Ellen Souza. I'm a resident of Mountain Ranch. I was here prior to the holidays and shared a story with you all about being attacked in downtown Mountain Ranch when I was walking and exercising my friend's service dog. She was out due to surgery, and I was in downtown Mountain Ranch. And I ran out of time that day, and I'm not one to just complain and not offer solutions. And I wanted to provide a couple of ideas for the consideration by the board. The way I see it, there's a couple of issues. One, it's clearly out-of-control dogs. Two, it's negligent owners. And three, then there are some what I would call unclaimed dogs that run loose, that nobody seems to know who they belong to. I think Calaveras County needs to seriously look at a leash law. The incident that happened with me with the service dog that I was exercising, if that man had had that dog on a leash, Russo would have never been mauled. That owner was across the street when that dog chose to aggress, completely unprovoked, and attack us. A leash would have prevented that. I realize that when we're talking leashes, a lot of people get nervous about having to have a leash on their dog at all times. I'm not talking about private land, I'm talking about public land. We were on Mountain Ranch Road on a bike path where anybody, including an adult with a child, an unsupervised child, another person walking a dog, should feel safe to walk. The other thing is, I think, Jack, you've been really good at this in the past of bringing people together for kind of town hall style community discussions. I'd encourage you specifically as my supervisor, but all of you to consider convening some kind of a town hall community meeting so people can talk about what are the issues with animals and dogs in particular. Many of my neighbors have lost animals. I know you have, Jack, livestock to animals that are running loose. I will say it has gotten better as some of the control has been put on the illegal cannabis grows and that sort of thing, but there are still too many dogs out there that are running loose. And then another piece I think has to go hand in hand, and that's the adequate funding of animal services. I think it's a disgrace as a community how we fund animal services. They don't have the amount of money they need, they don't have the staffing they need, and they don't have the enforcement options that they need. And so again, I would think that those would be areas where we could come together as a community to try to solve this problem before somebody ends up seriously maimed or dead. So thank you, and I appreciate your time in considering it. And I welcome your comments directed at me. You have my address. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Souza. Any other public comments?
Happy New Year, Vicki Reinke. I just wanted to make a comment now that we have the new board in place, the new chair, is that you would consider a different policy as far as answering questions from the public. I know the policy before was that was not needed. We didn't need answers. Now, I understand when we come up here for comments from the audience that you don't answer questions there because it's not on the agenda. But when there's an item on the agenda, I ask, please change that policy, that people keep notes and they answer questions that come to the microphone. Thank you.
Good morning, Beth Whitkey, District 5. I'd like to talk a little bit about the upcoming election and some transparency in people's transparency in their campaign literature, and also the claims they make on their websites about their past experience. It's unfortunate that Mr. Mills isn't here today, but he's made a lot of dubious claims about his past work history, his education history, and I think that is relevant, that people need to know the truth about the people when they go to the polls. I also want to talk about some of his campaign literature. His anti-cannabis page talks about all of the terrible things that both registered and unregistered growers have brought to the county. Those talking points are identical to the talking points of the people that are suing the county over the EIR that he voted to certify. There used to be a link on his Silent Poison page that went to the Crackham lawsuit page, and it appeared that he was actively fundraising to sue against the county. That strikes me as a serious conflict of interest, and that all closed session items before the county on this new lawsuit, he should be recused. So thank you.
I know I already commented, but please, what has just been said at this microphone is not true either, so we shouldn't be coming to this microphone about that kind of
Okay,
stuff. Thank you.
well, it's public comment. Other public comments?
Well, it's time to run against each other and see how dirty you can go. And I'm sorry. I think Supervisor Mills has done an exemplary job, and I totally support him. And people that want to degrade him and lie about him and assassinate his character, I feel sorry for you.
Who are you?
Rick DiBasilio, Sheriff, Calaveras County.
Did you need a razor?
No, I don't think I do. I did shave this morning. I missed a couple of spots, though. I just want to come up and say good morning, Board Chair and Vice Chair. Congratulations, and I'm sorry all at the same time. I wanted to ask, I have a presentation, probably about a 20-minute presentation that I'd like to bring forward at a future meeting for a product called Smart Water. It's something that is very innovative for the Sheriff's Office in reducing thefts and helping us solve some burglaries and some thefts. So I just would like to do about a 20-minute presentation. So if you guys can give me a day or when we can do that, I'd like to be able to set that up to do that.
If you could talk with Mr. Alt and
Okay.
Ms. Severud
I will
on
do that.
establishing it.
Yeah, we can do it, like right before public comment or right after public comment or something. Like I said, this will be short and brief. It'll just be a little PowerPoint presentation.
Or
Just
does it stop public comment? Is that why you
No.
want to do it before public
no,
comment?
no. It'll probably bring on more. So if you want to do it before, it would just add to public comment.
All right.
So your choice, however you'd like to do it.
Something with a study session is what you're suggesting. Small, brief presentation along with another study session.
No.
Let them
Okay.
decide.
No, the product's already been purchased by the
Yeah.
Friends of the Sheriff's Office. This is something that we're just going to enact. I want the public to know about it, and I want the board to know about it, and I just think that it would be something very informative for the public and the board to know what the Sheriff's Office is doing besides spending your money. Because I know that bothers you.
It does. If you could talk with the two
Sure.
of them and set something up.
Okay.
Fine, thank you.
And congratulations.
Good morning, Mike Falvey, District 2. Congratulations to the
Thank you.
board chairperson and vice chair. There was one person who spoke about some supposed mistruths and some campaign advertising, and another person who thinks a supervisor is doing an exemplary job. I don't know how you guys would address this, Brown Act things, but I would behoove the board to get together and discuss among themselves the fact that there are people watching the board and the actions they take and the claims they make, and they're going to bust them if they're lying. And it doesn't look good for a board if they have someone casting mistruths about themselves or other people. If it's a candidate, you guys can't control candidates. Candidate can say whatever they want, but you can have some input with your fellow supervisors. So I would behoove you to address, as a group, the fact that there seem to be some mistruths in a candidate's past history being reported. That doesn't look good. It doesn't instill a lot of confidence in the public, no matter what side you're on. So maybe the board ought to get together and discuss it among themselves, not to blow yourself up too much in public, your experience, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? I'm going to close public comments. Just information, Supervisor Garamendi mentioned it when we started board earlier, that Mr. Mills is over at the courthouse. He's a witness in a trial over there. That's why he's not with us. Okay, I'd like to move to the consent agenda.
Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They'll be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion.
Okay, does any board member wish to pull an item from consent? Any member of the public? What?
Sorry. Number 6, just briefly. I just have a couple of questions.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
Nothing bad.
13. Okay. Excuse me. May I have a motion on the balance of the consent agenda minus item 6 and 13?
I'll move the remainder, Madam Chair.
Motion by,
Second.
How soon we forget, you just lobbied me for,
did you listen to these people saying we got to be nice? Tell the truth, you're right. A motion by Supervisor Tuffanelli, a second by Supervisor Stopper, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, passes on a 4-0-1 absent vote. Thank you. Item number 6.
Item 6 is from the Public Works Department to authorize the board chair to execute Amendment 1 to an agreement with Holdridge and Cole Consulting Engineers and Geologists, increasing the maximum amount payable by $81,546 for a total not to exceed amount of $127,357 for the period of December 18th, 2019 through December 31st, 2020, to complete the design phase of the 2017 Winter Storm Hoover Road Repair Project and provide geotechnical services during construction.
Mr. Pack, I just have a couple of quick questions on this. What's the reason that the planning part of this has been expanded by so much? It looks like it's gone up close to $66,000.
Let's see, let me pull that back. I apologize. Again, my name's Joshua Pack. I'm your Director of Public Works and Transportation. The original, and looking at those total numbers, most of the request looks like it's under additional construction inspection and administrative costs, construction support. So a lot of the costs that we're asking for is as the project's moving forward to construction, the need to have them on call as engineering-related questions come up. That's necessary. The original scope didn't include that. We also had some additional geotech investigations that were necessary in order to deliver the project. And so the original scope didn't include that. So this includes some of the additional work necessary to get that to construction.
Okay, you also answered my other questions with that. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Okay. Or is there any public comment on item 6 since it's been pulled? May I have a motion on this item?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Stopper, second by, Supervisor Garamendi, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes on a 4-0-1 absent vote. Number 16?
13.
Thank you, 13.
Item 13 is from the Clerk of the Board of Supervisors to approve the bylaws for the Hardwood Advisory Committee effective immediately.
Ms. Gouda, did you want to come up here and give us what your question is, please?
There are a lot of people that think that people need to do research before they get here so that they know what's going on and all the details. And even supervisors, they expect them to do that. But it's very difficult sometimes to find information that's pertinent to the subject. And sometimes people in the county are reluctant to give that information out. Or they postpone it and say, well, we can't get it right now. And I've had all these experiences myself. And you guys pass these things without telling the public what is going on. And for instance, this particular one, it would be interesting to be able to see what those bylaws are so we could intelligently comment on them. But you guys have it over in the consent agenda where it's not even going to be discussed. And so I would really appreciate knowing what those bylaws are. It would have been nice ahead of time before you guys made a vote.
I
can
just
answer
want to,
that.
the bylaws are on the county website under the agenda item that went out to the public. That's the same agenda that we all use.
Well, I don't expect you to subsidize me so that I have access like that, but I don't.
Diane, don't we have a system where there's copies in your office? There's hard copies.
Did you want me to comment on that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do you want to finish the public comment and then I'll circle back?
Yeah, is there any other
Okay.
public comment on this item? No, thank you. Please
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay, so it is part of the agenda item. The bylaws were attached. What this item is the generic template that was approved by the Board of Supervisors for bylaws, I believe 2 years ago. The Hardwood Advisory Committee only meets once a year, so they met in December and they approved these bylaws because their staff contact, Kevin Wright, had worked with me and the committee, and he put in the pertinent information, how they were established, what governing documents they have. It just talks about membership. It talks about what their objectives are, if they have committees, the Brown Act, duties and responsibilities of officers, and doing an annual report to the Board of Supervisors. And so that's what this item is. To address Ms. Gordo's question, anyone can come into the clerk's office at any time during our regular business hours, 8 to 4, Monday through Friday, and have access to the agenda item on our lobby computers. And if they were interested in a particular item, we would be happy to print that out for them. They just need to come in and ask.
Thank you. I'm going to bring the item back to the board. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Stopper, second by Supervisor Tuffanelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes on a 4-0-1 absent vote. Thank you. Move to the regular agenda.
Item 20 is from Public Works, to adopt the plans and specifications for job order contracting projects for Public Works and the County Administrative Office, to authorize the Director of Public Works and Deputy County Administrative Officer to incorporate any final changes into the respective bid documents before advertising for bids, subject to County Council approval to the extent said changes affect any contractual terms or conditions, and to authorize the Department of Public Works and Deputy County Administrative Officer to solicit formal construction bids.
Do you want 5 minutes, Josh?
It'll take less than that, but it's totally your call. It's going to take about a minute.
All right.
No. We'll just wait for you.
Hey, Dennis, get those lights. Do you know those kids?
I don't. They were on a website I downloaded, so.
Wait a minute. You didn't know those kids?
Who does their hair? Looks like you guys go to the same place.
Perfect. All right. I think we're good to go. Appreciate your patience here. Yeah, I think you should. All right. All right. Well, good morning, Chair Callaway, members of the board. My name is Joshua Pack. I'm your Director of Public Works and Transportation, and I am pleased today to present a action item related to job order contracting. So the proposed action we're asking you to take today is to adopt the plans and specifications for job order contracting, better known as JOC, as well as to solicit formal construction bids on behalf of us and administration. I do want to highlight this is one action item we're asking, but there's actually two separate processes. We're adopting separate JOC programs for public works and administration. So we'll be moving parallel with those, but today we're taking one board action with that. I do want to highlight there was a previous board action in July 2019 to adopt a contract with the Gordian Group. A representative is here today in case you have any questions of him. They provided to provide JOC services as part of our program through June 2022. This action today is the next step as part of that contract. So it's been a few months since I've been here, and I want to bring to you what job order contracting is, a little bit of a background. And what it is really is it's an alternative contracting procedure that's designed to allow contractors to complete a lot of smaller projects through a single bid. It's designed for things like renovation, repair, minor construction, not meant for larger projects. It is somewhat akin to an on-call contractor process. So in essence, we're using on-call contractors, but we're using the public contract code to do it competitively based on preset prices. And so in this case, we have contractors and we actually have agreed upon prices. We just need the work. And when we find and identify the work, we then work with contractors on those individual items. It's allowed by the public contract code. I think in the right situation, it provides considerable value to the county, either through saving time and money or through maintaining the transparency and accountability we come to expect from public works or public projects. So when I talk about alternative projects, it makes sense to talk about what our traditional contracting procedure is. And us, like everyone else in the country, use what's called design bid build. And what that is we bifurcate each individual process sequentially and deliver those individually. So in layman's terms, a design project is done by a designer, and then we go to construction and we hire a contractor to do the previous project. In some cases, we have other phases for public works. Right of way would be a phase, preliminary engineering, environmental, all may potentially be phases. There's some advantages to that. It's used by everyone in the country. It's been used for many decades. We get competition, which is a benefit to the county through a low bid process. There's a couple of disadvantages with it. One of the disadvantages is there are significant administrative efforts to use design bid build. Whether we're LA County or Calaveras County, a lot of the procedures in the public contract code apply equally to all of us. And so when we have a lot of really small projects, 100,000, 300,000, that may not sound like a lot, or that sound like a lot, but for agencies that's pretty small. We're required to follow the same procedures as multi-million-dollar projects in urban areas. And so for us, we spend a disproportionate amount of time on the soft costs that don't necessarily result in value to the community. It can be adversarial in nature, and this isn't for every case and for every contractor, but bidding things in this way requires low bid, and we can't really use other factors when determining bidders. And so contractors are motivated to bid on razor-thin margins and in a competitive process, and then have to pursue their profits through claims and change orders. And so again, not everyone does that, but it sets us off sometimes on the wrong foot, especially when someone may underbid a project and need to make up their profit in some other way. And so there's also the process where the contractors typically aren't involved in the design process. And so they're looking at a design that the first thing they're doing is they're finding faults with it. And it can be at times a contentious project. Again, not everybody, but in some instances. It's a really slow way to deliver projects as well. When we look at Calaveras County, and we're not different than anyone else, a lot of the procedures we follow are pretty standardized throughout the state and nation. Overall, we look at about more than 5 months that it takes from when we're done from construction to when we're ready to put a shovel in the ground and start digging. And that's a long time. And there is some value, obviously, in this process, but when we look at some of the restrictions we have from weather, we have, especially in the upper elevations, we have a pretty defined time limit. In some cases, we do struggle to get bidders. And so when you look at all these things, we can see projects that can be delivered fairly quickly instead take months, or in some cases, years. Job order contracting is a response to some of the limitations of design bid build. It's designed to work on a variety of projects, again, pretty routine, basic stuff, not meant for large projects. It's a supplemental tool. It's not meant to replace our traditional processes. It's meant to augment that and provide some value where there could be value. As I mentioned, it's an approved bidding procedure in the Public Contract Code. And I'm going to talk about this in an upcoming slide, but I think the nature of job order contracting has an opportunity to greatly improve local contractor participation and involvement in many of our projects. Again, looking at this slide, I don't mean to spend too much time on this, but there's a niche in which job order contracting tends to work really well, and that's for projects that are low in cost but exceed our authority to do on our own. This one shows $1.5 million, and each agency is a little different, but this slide's meant to show that for small projects that exceed the authority in the Public Contract Code, there is a niche for JOC, and that's a lot of the projects that we do. And so the larger projects, again, for us, it's big bridge projects. Wagon trail project would be certainly classified as a big project. Huge projects on behalf of facilities would also be the traditional bidding process. This is an example of what we would go through under traditional job order contract, and I'm purposely picking on Supervisor Callaway and her district. This is the Murphy's Drive project. We just completed that project. It took a couple of years to do. This scenario assumes that something happens in the future, something akin to this, where we have a culvert that washes out, it results in a washed out road. We need some sort of immediate response to that. In this particular scenario, under job order contracting, the county, Gordian Group, our consultants, and the contractor meet in the field to have a joint scope meeting to outline the repair process. And this is where that collaboration and cooperation really come into play. The contractor's part of the team determining what the repairs are going to be. They're engaged in the process, they have a say in the solution, and through the preset prices, there's really no motivation to try and hide or suppress information, because they're going to be adequately paid and adequately compensated for the work they perform. And so once the joint scope meeting is complete, the contractor prepares a proposal, presents it to us in Gordian. We review that proposal. If it all works out, we may have an iteration here or two. Once we all agree and we're on the same page, we issue a job order and the project construction starts. Under a normal circumstance, this can take 3 to 6 weeks. It can take a little longer in a more complicated situation. Under emergency situations, in particular when something needs immediate response, this can happen within days or a week or two. And so when you're looking at our traditional processes and why I'm so engaged in this, things that take months or years, especially simple repetitive projects, can now take weeks. And so it greatly expedites our ability to deliver projects. I've talked about public works and the benefits that it provides us. In reality, though, the genesis of job order contracting comes from the facilities world. It was developed in the 1970s by the military to improve buildings in Europe. It's since expanded to other uses, but its bread and butter is things like HVAC repair and electrical and plumbing and flooring and sheetrock repair, routine maintenance. It's really designed for those sort of things. And again, when you start thinking back to local contractors, those are the sort of services we have here. We have those folks. And so, again, any sort of thing that the county does that's generally repairs, renovation, minor construction could potentially be eligible under job order contracting. While it's new to Calaveras County, it's not new to California. A lot of agencies use job order contracting. I've highlighted San Joaquin. We've worked a lot with them over the last 6 to 9 months. We've met with their staff. They have a program that's pretty mature, so we've looked at them as a template for us. It scaled down a little bit, obviously, for Calaveras County. The thing I want to highlight here is the agencies here are large. And the thing that's unique here is that Calaveras County would be the smallest county that would implement job order contracting. And that's one thing that gets me excited, because the benefits and the inherent nature of job order contracting are especially attractive to rural agencies that struggle to meet, they have to deliver projects but may not have the administrative firepower to do so in an expedited manner. If we are successful, I've had 2 or 3 counties already express an interest in our program. We have the opportunity to set the template for many rural agencies moving forward, kind of being an industry leader in this. So the Public Works Director side of me definitely gets excited about that and providing proof of concept that could help a lot of other agencies and not just Calaveras County. There's a lot of benefits. I've talked about some of those already. The 2 I want to highlight in the next 2 slides are the quality of work and the potential increase in local contractor and subcontractor participation. First of all, through the improved quality of work, and again, this isn't to say that we don't get good quality out of our other processes, but the thing that we think motivates, has the potential for increased quality is, while we're potentially approving contracts in the millions of dollars, the contracts only guarantee $50,000 of work. And so the contractors, through individual task orders, complete $50,000, and then we evaluate the contractors based on their performance. Things like their time, their cost, their responsiveness. We have a dozen or more metrics that will be monitoring contractor performance. Once their work is up above $50,000, those contractors that are best performing work will continue to receive job orders and task orders in the potential amount of millions of dollars. And so there is a motivation for contractors to do it right the first time, to collaborate with the county. And contractors have the potential for a lot more work at guaranteed costs and guaranteed profit margins. So there's a strong benefit for contractors. There's a strong benefit for us. We want to pay contractors fair and reasonable rates. We're not trying to undercut contractors. And so this sort of guaranteed preset pricing and a potential for additional work creates a scenario which could greatly benefit the county. And again, this process essentially eliminates change orders and claims, because we have preset prices. So they can no longer, there's a process. If they have additional items, we just approve a new job order with the new pricing that's already approved, and they go perform the work. So it's a very structured, formalized process. The last thing I want to talk about, and I want to be a little careful talking about local contractor opportunities, because on the one hand, I think a lot of folks in this room would agree that we look for opportunities to get our local residents, our local contractors work. On the other hand, we also have a responsibility to the community and taxpayers to do things in a reasonable and cost-efficient manner. In some cases, that works great. In some cases, that doesn't necessarily line up. We also have state laws and federal laws that sometimes limit our ability to contract in those particular manners. But what we've seen with job order contracting is, especially on the facility side, a significant portion of work is done by subcontractors. And with the smaller and recurring maintenance projects that are typically involved, that generally lines up with the local contractor market. Again, there's electricians, there's plumbers, there's roofers here in the community, and they're in a position to provide those services. San Joaquin, they've been monitoring their performance, and they've been tracking both their work with traditional bidding procedures and job order contracting. Their traditional bidding procedures on average saw local contractor participation in the teens and low 20% range, depending on project. With job order contracting, they've seen their percentages go upwards of 80% or more in some cases on average. So again, we have been working with Gordian to create opportunities for participation. We had a pre-project meeting that was very well attended. We had about 30 people in total attend. A lot of those were local contractors interested in the program. To me, that's amazing to get 30 contractors to show up on a non-mandatory meeting. I think it shows a lot of interest on behalf of the community. If the board does approve the invitation to bids, we'll be having a mandatory pre-bid conference, and that'll, again, another opportunity for local subcontractors to establish relationships with potential bidders on the project. And then finally, we have opportunities to encourage local vendors. Again, we have laws and requirements that limit some of those, but in essence, hopefully you see here that the general structure of job order contracting, due to its small repetitive nature and preset prices, is really advantageous to local contractors and local subcontractors to get engaged and be involved in projects that they may have not previously been able to do so. The last slide before I kind of wrap things up, the potential cost savings here is tremendous. In Public Works just alone, we believe we have about $18 million or so in projects that would be eligible for job order contracting over the next 3 years. Running the numbers, I feel that we could potentially save upwards of $900,000 or more just in administrative costs, those soft costs that don't necessarily provide additional construction or additional value in the field. There are opportunities for additional cost savings through things like improved efficiencies, reduced threats and claims to the county, and this is scalable. So the more we use it, there is a greater potential for increased savings. And the last thing I want to highlight here is this is optional. So it's part of our education and experience that if we see projects that we don't think we're going to see cost savings and it might make more sense to use traditional bidding, let's use traditional bidding. So this is, again, it's not a replacement of that. It's a tool, and it gives us an option to pursue the best option on a project-by-project basis. So in summary, we think this is a really powerful tool. We think it helps deliver small, repetitive projects quickly, deliver them efficiently while still maintaining a lot of that transparency and accountability that we expect from our projects. We look at it as a county-wide solution. Again, it doesn't preclude us from using traditional bidding procedures. This is a tool, a supplemental tool. And the last thing I want to highlight here is the risk is pretty minimal to the county. There's minimal contract value, as I mentioned, $50,000 minimum limit, so those are small projects for us. There's no obligation for additional job orders. If a contractor doesn't perform the way we like, we don't have to continue to use them. State law and the Public Contract Code limit this program annually, so each year we have to come back to the board to have this renewed. So if the board doesn't like the performance, if the board has issues or concerns, the board would certainly have the right each and every year to weigh in on the program and continue or discontinue based on your vision. And finally, hopefully I've convinced you or at least talked about the opportunity for a high reward for the county. This opportunity motivates contractors to complete work on time at a high quality, potentially at reduced cost. And to me, I don't say game changer a lot, but the board has a lot of expectations of Public Works and the county as a whole to deliver projects and deliver valuable programs. And I think this is a game changer for us to be able to meet or exceed your expectations. The last slide before I open it up to questions. This is if the board does approve the invitation to bids. The next steps, we're having a mandatory pre-bid meeting. That's February 6th. So again, another opportunity for local contractors to meet with some of the bigger contractors who may be bidding on this to establish those relationships. We would open bids on February 20th at 3 p.m. Assuming no discrepancies or complications, we would hope to award contracts in March or early April 2020. And if all things go according to plan, we would have a fully active and engaged job order contracting program that could begin delivering projects as early as spring of this year. And so I'm sure you have questions. I'm sure I would if I was up there, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you for your time and your attention this morning.
Thank you. Do any of the supervisors have a question? Mr. Garamendi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Pack. I attended that non-mandatory meeting. It was very informative. Thank you. I'm still trying to learn this program. I think I understand how it works in Public Works, but I have two questions. And they both come around. First one is how are we going to, when we give out these bids and we collect the people submit their bids, how are we going to scale or weight local contractors? And then more important, or as important, how will we define what those actually are? For example, we have contractors whose business may be in Amador County, but they live in Calaveras, or vice versa. How will we weight? My first question: how will we weight local contracting?
It's a good question, and so we have, first of all, we have a sheet that's totally editable and changeable. Local contractors are just one of the elements, like time and cost and things are part of that. The most important thing is there's not necessarily rules that limit how we do local contractors. So right now we're proposing that a residence or address in Calaveras County would be considered a local contractor. We could certainly amend that if we if we want to include neighboring counties, things like Amador and Tuolumne, et cetera. But right now we're looking at at Calaveras only as being local. But we use, and the most important thing here is that we're fair and impartial. So in some cases, it's apples to apples. Contractors performing work on the same sort of way, we can look at the use of local contractors as one of the determining factors of performance. There are some cases that local contractors just can't perform work, and I'm going to pick a really exotic solution, but let's say we have a bridge that's underwater and we need to do some sort of underwater excavation. I mean, we don't have that. I don't mean to offend the local contracting community, but I'm not thinking we have 30 vendors in town that are experts at doing underwater underwater sort of work. So we got to be a little careful with that on using that as a determining factor. There's also state and federal laws. Some of our grants prohibit from using that extensively. But again, I want to highlight that that's the additional goals. It's one of a number of factors. Right now, we're recommending that we use Calaveras County as the county boundary as the definer for that. And again, if they have great contractor participation, but they're not on time, they're very difficult to deal with, their performance has been lackluster, we don't want local preference to be the only weight factor. We want to have that as part of an overall factor when we're looking at our contractor performance.
Thank you. So what will be the weight for a local contractor?
Yeah, so I don't have that number in front of me. We have 12 or 13 factors. It's in there with the other ones. I'd be happy to go offline and get that. It's 1 or 2 sheets in a 3,500 page document. So I would say it's in a range of factors. It's 5 to 10% of the overall performance. It might be a rough range, and we could certainly skew that as necessary. And I think one of the things we're going to learn too is we're utilizing San Joaquin County's model. It's been successful, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything in San Joaquin fits for Calaveras. And so the first year, I look at it a little bit of a learning process. We're going to have a factor with local contractors. We'll see how that works, and then if we see that either skewing one way or the other, we can certainly each year amend those performance factors.
Okay, perfect. Second, actually turns into 3 questions, Madam Chair, if that's all right. Second question is, we're going to be checking the payroll to make sure that subs and contractors are paying correct with their public funds?
Yes. All work, while this is, and that's a really good point to a larger issue, that while this is a different contracting procedure, we are required to follow prevailing wage, public contract code, the Department of Industrial Relations, there's requirements there that we have to follow. Certified payroll is certainly part of that. So part of their performance is all including that information. So this is all prevailing wage work. Contractors, subcontractors doing that will be eligible for that. We'll be tracking and monitoring it. And that will also be a metric of their performance by turning those in, submitting that information. We'll be checking that information as part of local contractor participation. It'll be set on percentages. So, for example, there'll be, and I'm kind of answering your earlier question, so the higher the percentage of local contractor participation, the more points they get. And so if they have less than 25 to 50%, 50% to 75%. And there's 2 factors with that. There's the local contractor participation companies that are in here, and then local residents. And so we'll also be looking at the local residents that are hired, maybe independent folks or folks who are just an out-of-town company comes in, but they're hiring locally. That'll be another factor. So actually 2 of our factors will be related to local contractor performance.
Okay. Final question is, just because I was trying to explain this to somebody over the weekend in anticipation of this. So let's use an example. Let's say you're a glazer, and you've got to deal with the facilities. We blow out this window, you're going to come in and fix it. Will they also be working with, for example, your department in case we have a blown out windshield to replace those? Is that the same contract that they'd be going for, and how would that sort of impact? It's not a general contract, but it's a very specific
And
trade.
so we actually have 2 separate processes. So we're doing one for administration that includes facilities, integrated waste, and those are facilities driven. So a lot of the licenses for construction are Class B licenses. They're more specialized. Those needs for the facility side are different than public works side. We need road, heavy construction, grading, that sort of thing. So the contractors are on the other side. So we'll have two separate processes, but there's nothing that precludes crossover. So if facilities needs a road repaired, and maybe it's under our job order contracting program, not under facilities, we could certainly deliver that through our job order contracting program. And if we have needs, if we have, for example, we're doing repairs in Building D on Public Works, if we want to use job order contracting through facilities, we could certainly do that as well.
So it'd be two bid documents?
It's two bid documents separate, one more leaning towards facilities and one leaning towards the Public Works side. But I could ask Bonnie, our Deputy CAO, to do a project on her side, and vice versa. Bonnie could ask us to deliver a project. And obviously their budget would pay for it, and our budget and those things wouldn't be affected. But
So obviously, if Patrick's buying an aggregate for the equipment shed he's putting up over there, you would have that bid, and so that would make more sense.
Although I will say, the facility side is more encompassing than the public works side. The facilities, I believe, and the book's 5,500 pages, so I haven't read every page, but the aggregate and a lot of those basic things are included in their bids as well. So they'll be getting bids, and they have the opportunity to use that as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Stopper?
Thank you for bringing up those questions, Jack. You addressed most everything I had. So when you're doing your presentation, so the low bid is the one you need to take as long as they're qualified underneath this point system that you're discussing with us.
Yeah, and that's where, when we talk about public contract code, and that's where we determine the low bidders. That's where it qualifies for public contract code, because when we identify the contractors for the program, when we're recommending 3 contractors under each scenario, those 3 are based on the low bid. So that's where it qualifies for the public contract code. And the contractors are really bidding on $50,000 of work. And then with the opportunity to get a lot more if they work successfully. So that's where it works within the public contract code, because traditionally, under normal bidding procedures, we can't use things like how much we like the contractor, the great work they've done before, or the poor work they've done before. We can't necessarily use that as determining factors in a bidding process. So this is where we satisfy the conditions of the public contract code, and then have some flexibility within that, as long as we're being fair and impartial. I can't like contractor 1 and then give him a different scoring system than contractor 2. We have to be fair and impartial as part of that process, and the contractors see that ahead of time.
And so, yeah, that leads into my second part of the question, with $50,000 being the line where they do a bid, and you get to a point where we aren't receiving the type of work that we need to for that $50,000. Is that contractor then disqualified for being one of the bid contractors later on other jobs, or are they just lowered on the bar for putting in the bid?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so generally speaking, they're lower. There could be a disqualification, but I don't want to say they're disqualified. They're still eligible, but we're not going to use them. Right. And that's and that happens sometimes. And I can say I've seen scenarios in which the first case or two don't work, 50,000, and then they make changes that could potentially lead us to an improved relationship. So we don't want to necessarily burn that bridge. A year is a really short time. Yeah. And so what usually happens with the job order contracting program is you have 3 contractors that you've identified. Usually 1 or 2 kind of stick out from the rest, and they tend to get the lion's share, and usually 1 kind of drops out. And then what usually happens, and again, I'm not predicting anything and leaning anything, but usually if they see that and we're just struggling with that relationship, they usually in subsequent job order contracting programs usually don't bid, because they know it's not a program that works. And sometimes it just doesn't fit. Sometimes the local contract or the contractor it's just not working out. It's not the right fit for them. They don't perform as much work as they were hoping. They don't bid the next time, and then the ones that are really successful tend to stay in the program. And so over time, it tends to mature. And we've seen this in San Joaquin and the other agencies. These agencies have been using it for a long time. I'm not aware of anyone who's dropped a job order contracting program that's had it in place. So it kind of leans to the success of the program statewide.
So basically, it creates a more competitive market for these contracts in the sense that, you want to put forward a quality product at the best price for us.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's guaranteed profits for them. So when they bid what's called a multiplier. And so if they think that it costs $10 to deliver a widget, or the actual cost to deliver a widget is 10, if they add 10%, then they're going to get paid $11 for that widget. And so whether they deliver one widget or 50 widgets or 5 million widgets, they're going to get paid that same profit margin. So there's no value in hiding something and then trying to jack up the price later on, because they've already agreed to a price based on the competitive bidding process.
Understood. Thank you very much, Mr. Pack.
Supervisor.
Hi, Josh.
Thank you.
Good morning. It's interesting you picked $50,000. Is there a reason you picked $50,000? Because the state raised the level recently and we adopted it, that you can go without bids to $60,000. So I'm between 50 and 60. I don't, why the bottom isn't 60?
Yeah, and the reason is there's no real rhyme or reason. We looked at other agencies. Some agencies don't have any minimum. They say there's zero guaranteed work, and the concern with that was that that contractors may not bid if they don't have some sort of guaranteed minimum. Other agencies do 100,000 or more. Our concern, especially in the first year, was we didn't want to have something so like 100 or 200,000 that if we found a contractor that wasn't really working well, we felt that $50,000 was enough to set a bar that would attract contractors without exposing us to so much risk. And so in reality, the difference between the 50 is coincidental. It's not, there wasn't a design to line it up with the 60,000. It's just coincidental. And it's a number that other agencies have kind of landed on over time. And it's like I said, some don't do any, some do a much higher number, especially some larger agencies use a higher number. But yeah, it's more coincidental than anything else.
And then the other question I have is your statement about eliminating change orders. Simply because if we're doing a job and the scope of work is this, and you run into something that's not under the scope, would normally describe what a change order is. You're saying there's already pricing in there for whatever it is. So is it a separate contract to do that?
Yeah.
It is a separate contract.
So it's actually...
So otherwise, it's a change order. No matter how you disguise it, it's going to be a change order.
Yeah, the semantics are a little bit different. You're correct, and the semantics are the same. We don't call it a change order. It's issuing a new job order. So basically, let's say they had to replace this panel, and I love this panel. It's fantastic. But let's say you changed this paneling, and you decided you wanted to change that paneling in two. And so under the normal situation, we'd issue a change order. Sometimes we don't know what that pricing is. And so then you'd have to haggle with the contractor on that price. And sometimes that's a struggle, depending on the price they give you. Here, we issue a new job order. And so it's the same preset pricing. It's the same pricing. So yeah, it's a little bit interchangeable. It's not exactly the same, because usually change orders, there's a sense of unknown when you issue a change order.
Well, this time and materials is what you're tagged with, basically, plus a 10%.
Exactly. So maybe time and materials, it's a synonym. It's kind of similar. It's not exactly the same, but I appreciate that they're both very similar processes, albeit not identical.
But there will, it's still, okay, it's just a different word, but it would be a change order. If you're out, you're doing bridge replacement and you run into, during the footings, you didn't realize that there was granite rocks there and you had to do blasting. It wasn't in the scope of work. It would technically, regardless if you had pre-bid money into it, because I have to do a scope of values on some jobs, which is basically what you're speaking of. If we run into something, these are the values at which I would be able to charge for. It's there. There's going to be changes in jobs. It's just you have pre-pricing for it that's included in their scope of work bid package.
Exactly. So yeah, that's again semantics.
I just wanted to make
clear.
They're
very similar. Albeit the thing I want to highlight is it's guaranteed pricing. So there's no, and you dealt with change orders a lot. Sometimes that can be a very stressful issue. And the board just adopted a thing in the consent calendar about that same issue with change orders, et cetera.
Correct.
So yeah, so that's it's semantics a little bit.
And I just wanted to clarify that.
Agreed, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Josh, I just had one more question, following up from Gary's question. We say there's a $50,000 minimum. Use the example of the glazer. What does that mean? I mean, are we guaranteeing everybody who bids $50,000 of work, or is it up to $50,000?
Yeah.
And how's that going to impact our little guys?
Yeah, so there's we're recommending 3 contracts for facilities and 3 for public works. And so the prime, whoever's that contractor, is guaranteed a minimum of $50,000 of work. Now, whether they deliver that themselves or hire subcontractors to perform that work, the county is obligated to give them $50,000 of work at some point in the year in which that contract's up. Once that $50,000 is surpassed, we're no longer obligated to give them any additional work. And so I don't know if the glazer's the best example. If the glazer's a subcontractor, and that's the other thing, each project can have different subcontractors. So you're not tied into one subcontractor for the life of the contract.
So who would be like an example of a contractor?
So George Reed, and I don't mean to, let me use them. They're a big contractor. They do work with us in the past. That let's say they get one of our contracts. We are obligated to give them $50,000 of work. Beyond that, and how they use that $50,000, whether they do it themselves, whether they hire subs, the only guarantee they have is that they get $50,000 of work in that calendar year, or in that year of the contract. After that, they're not obligated for a penny more. But the contract max, as we're recommending in the board packet, is $2 million per contract. So they have the minimum of $50,000, but a potential maximum of $2 million. As a matter of fact, public contract code, the max that they allow is upwards of $5 million. So we could use job order contracting for that. I'm not recommending that as a first year. I'm keeping it a little lower. But there's, again, the chance for reward based on a small minimum guarantee. And the guarantee is really trying to just prove that we are going to give you work. We're going to give you an opportunity to come in and do some work, and we're going to impartially evaluate you. And so the concern that we had is if you had a $0, but the board could certainly select that, is that if you have 0, the contractors go, they're not doing anything. They're just doing this just to do it. And the board and contractors have to do bid bonds. They have to do all their estimating. There's a cost associated with the work that they do. And without any guaranteed work, we may see a suppression of bids as a result.
I mean, I certainly see it when you look at, public works, you buy a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But how does that apply for like a facilities?
Yeah, so the prime on the facility may be, let's say, for example, an HVAC company may be. And this is where it gets a little more different because there's a lot more variation in a facilities contract because there's a lot of different work and there's not a lot of companies that specialize in all that stuff.
Right.
And so they may look, a prime may look at the fact that we have a lot of remodeling or general, someone may look and say, oh, you have a lot of remodeling in the future. I'm going to bid this as a prime. And then, but there may be $50,000. They may not get much of that because maybe some of the work is for, the first thing we do is for an HVAC repair. And then the next thing is we have plumbing repairs. We have a $10,000 plumbing repair. And so they might sub that out as part of the project. I don't recall we have limits on subcontracting. Some contracts limit that. I don't recall that we limited that. And so they could theoretically use most of their contract on subcontractors.
So you would need a general contractor, and then they would go and hire that glazer.
Exactly. So, and there's no limit. I want to highlight, under a large single project, they identify their subcontractors, they have to use them. Under this, they're allowed to use, what we care about is the pricing. So as long as they find a subcontractor that meets the pricing that they approved, that they agreed to, they can use any subcontractor they want. So if they find good subcontractors that work well, especially locally, they can continue to use those time and time again, or if they don't work, they can find another subcontractor.
Thank you.
Mr. Topanelli.
Yes, elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I am a sub.
Yeah, so.
The fact is that, yes, they have to submit their subs for approval from the to the county when they select subs for that project. They may go out and get quotes from subs.
Yeah.
But they have to submit that list of who's going to be on your project as a sub. And then you have right to accept those subs as being qualified to do the work or not, just like you do with the prime contractor. The other question I had, going back to what Jack was elaborating on, at what point, if you start at $50,000 and you have a maximum, and you're going to see what they do for $50,000, and you have a maximum of $2 million, At what point does this project that they're being hired to do, is there a point where it could, and you're giving them more work and giving them more work, that is a project that needs to go back out for bid? I mean, at what point do you determine that somebody doesn't come in and say, hey, I think you guys violated something here, that's not what they were bidding on, that's not what the scope of work was, you're increasing it by going around the bidding process?
So, yeah, I'm sorry.
That's
Yeah. So here's the cleverness and the legality of job order contracting. Is job order contracting covers every job the county does. And so it's anything that we may do in a year that's in our budget. And so if we do, let's say, a road project and we decide to extend down another road that wasn't in the scope, that wasn't in the original job order, we issue a separate job order or change order, as you may claim, or talk or call it. But in reality, all that work is under the umbrella. It's over the single contract. So there's no differentiating or exceeding the scope of the work. It's all under the work that they competitively bid as part of the job order contract. So they're not exceeding. Now, money could certainly be something we have to be cognizant of our limits, and we can't exceed $2 million. But beyond that, the work that's identified, anything identified in the scope, which is pretty much anything we can do in the county, is all covered under that. So there's no scope creep, there's no exceeding that. It's different. It's different than the way we've ever done things before. It's a different model. So.
Yeah, I can agree. It's an alternative to the traditional bidding procedures.
Mr. Stopper.
Throughout this, you sort of answered, because when I originally read through this entire agenda item, it says three contracts for public works and 3 contracts for administration. That's 3 contractors apiece. So then you get those 3 starting at the beginning of the year for 1 for, let's say, facilities, and 3 for facilities and 3 for public works. And those are the ones that originally have the $50,000 a year apiece. And that's where you work from. And then the next year you may choose a different 3 depending on, or, take the top 2. And then there may be a filler on the lower one.
So, no, actually.
No.
Let me change that. So after the year, we come back to you and redo the competitive process again. And so after the end of the year, and this is state law, the JOC program, we come back for a new set of bid documents with new pricing. We go out and advertise, and we select the 3 lowest bidders. So even though for a year those contractors do great work, but then after the year they do have to come back and competitively bid and be selected as one of the lowest 3 contractors. So that's where we get where it's legal with the public contract code. Some other agencies, some other states have a much linear time. They have a 2 or 3 year period or more. California adopted job order contracting relatively recently, in the last 15, 20 years, or relatively recently. That hasn't changed. So it's a year-by-year process. So we have to come back every year to get approval from you to go back through this process again.
Go ahead.
Well, that opens up another can of worms. You have to go back out for bid at the end of 1 year. What if they're not finished with the project that they're on? And there still needs to be completion, and it may be another 3 months before they complete it.
So this does allow them to complete the work. So it requires us that we rebid, but that doesn't exclude us from continuing to complete the work that's within the project. It's a good question.
You 2 have any more questions?
Maybe
Question
later.
now? I don't know.
They keep coming up, Marita.
Mr. Pot, what are the things that keep local contractors from bidding on government projects, Calaveras County projects? Is it the insurance? Is it the paperwork?
Yeah, and each person's different, right? So if I could tell you generally what I've heard. Prevailing wage is always going to be somewhat of a limiter, right? The paperwork that's necessary to do that, especially in recent years, the rules have become increasingly difficult. And it's not hard to do, but it can be scary for a local contractor who's been performing small work and small residential work to then all of a sudden try to do prevailing wage work. So That can be a factor. That's one of the ones I've heard. In some cases, there's bureaucracy, right? A lot of the processes that we do are more difficult than going through private contractors or private firms. And in this sort of market, it's hard to attract a lot of contractors because the construction market's so white hot. Everyone's busy. Everyone who wants to be busy is busy. And so, do they really need to work with, cities or counties? Especially when we talk about the razor-thin margins. When we're bidding solely on low bids, sometimes that there's not enough guaranteed profit when you can go elsewhere. And so that's, again, one of the advantages of this: small repetitive projects, guaranteed profit margins. All of those things are things to encourage local contractors where maybe they won't. And yeah, the prevailing wage piece is still going to be there. There's no way getting around that, short of an act of the Congress. But but these other things could potentially improve that participation.
Well, since they're not bidding on a specific project, they're bidding on the concept of JOC. So material costs, how is that part of their bid process?
Yeah, and so, I did not submit the package to you for reasons. I think ours is 3,800 pages, and the other one is facilities is 5,200
That's
pages.
good. We thank you.
I really didn't want. I'm sure you wanted to do a deep dive on that, but everything is in there. So materials are broken out separately. Trucking costs are broken out separately. Everything is painstakingly and meticulously broken down, and we're using local rates. And so, the local asphalt plant was called for their batch pricing. Material prices were received from aggregate plants here in Calaveras County and close by. And so we're using that information to get that. And then the bidding, it's not just how much can you do to dig that hole, it's how much to get the equipment there, how much to do traffic control. All of these items, how many miles you have to drive to the site, that's included, because the longer you drive, the more expensive it costs in gas and equipment. And so all these things are in the bid process. So again, trying to adequately capture your costs, it's not just how much does it cost to fix that hole, it's all of those individual items are as part of the bid process. So those are all potentially captured, which again, I think it allows local contractors to capture all those costs completely and accurately.
Thank you. Are there any questions at this moment? I'd like to open up for public comment. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say on this? Pardon?
Happy New Year. Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. Boy, this is a really big job. It looks like quite a bit of savings to the taxpayer, which is a good thing. One of the issues was brought up of favoring local contractors over contractors that are not local. That's kind of a discrimination by location. It would seem if local contractors would be selected because of their location rather than their price, the difference in price would be like a bonus paid for by the taxpayers for the fact that they are in our county. Contractors that come to our county to bid on our work here have an additional cost. And they're bidding with potentially less profit margin because they have to pay for transportation costs to come here. Our local people do not have that cost. So there is a built-in benefit to local contractors in this bidding process without having to do this bonus thing where the taxpayers are going to pay a premium because they live here. That's not, protectionism just doesn't seem to work. It doesn't work in local government, it doesn't work in state government, it doesn't work in nations. All it does is cost money without benefit. So, now what I'm hearing is kind of you select the three lowest bids, and then you have a lot of factors to consider, including their reputation. And so it kind of gets blurry as to if there really is a bonus and cost to the taxpayer because they're local or not. It's kind of, when it's blurry, it's kind of hidden. What happens if there isn't $50,000 of work? Say that we have a contract for paving, and there really isn't $50,000 of work scheduled for paving. Do we have to just pay that money without having work, or do we make work to meet the 50,000? Change orders, of course, that's more complicated. And my time is up, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Segala.
It is a lot of work, there's no question about that. I personally feel that there should be an opening for spontaneity, because sometimes you can make a better deal, and I don't know that this makes it possible to do that. It reminds me of the Middle Ages when everybody had to work 7 years to make shoes before you could make shoes on your own, even though you knew how to make shoes. And it just makes it hard to be spontaneous, and that's my reservation.
Any other comments? I want to bring it back to the board. Mr. Segala did have a question, with 50,000, if there's not $50,000 worth of work. I don't see it happening, but,
Yeah.
because we're talking about 50,000 in a year, not per project.
Yeah, and we have a lot of work to do, as you're very familiar. On the public works side, I think I mentioned previously, we've got in the neighborhood of, it was 17.8 million, I think, in work, and I can't find it, but it was 17.8 million in work. There it is, of projects over the next 3 years that could potentially use job order contracting. Facilities has a lot of work too. Even outside of the scope of work that we've talked about through the subcommittee and et cetera, there's just general repairs and maintenance that has to get done on the projects, whether HVAC or minor remodels. And so the work list is long and distinguished, and there is far more work. And if it ever gets to the point in 3 or 4 years where we've delivered everything and we don't have new projects, we either reduce the amount of contractors or we eliminate the job order contracting program. So this is part of that analysis, is looking at it each year, making sure we have sufficient work, which I can guarantee you we have way more than the work that's eligible for JOC. And we look at this each year. And so if the next year we don't see it, maybe we reduce to 2 contractors or we increase to 4 contractors. That's purely at the board discretion. There's a limit on the amount of contractors. And we can change that number too. We can reduce that. We can eliminate the $50,000. We can increase it to 100. That's purely at the discretion of the board.
Thank you. Mr. Stopper?
Could you readdress the local preference thing also that Mr. Segala brought up and what you had explained earlier?
Yeah, so again, local preference, there's no bonuses or changing and fluctuation of prices. The prices are preset, they're guaranteed. Whether that same delivery for the same price is delivered by a local contractor or a contractor in Sacramento or Fresno, we pay the same price. And that's part of the local contracting procedures anyways. We have to openly and competitively negotiate these prices. So in this particular case, if a local contractor can deliver that for that price, they are certainly eligible to do so. We're using local contractors as one of many factors to look at the overall performance of a contractor. So if 2 contractors are the exact same and one's using local contractors and getting the same value and same performance than the other one, then that contractor may be slightly higher than the first one or than the second one. But in reality, it's just one of factors. But it doesn't change price. The price stays the same, whoever performs the work, because that was pre-negotiated.
Do you have anything else?
If no one else has anything, I'll make a motion.
I'd like a motion on all 3 items on this agenda item.
So moved.
Motion by Supervisor Stopper, a second.
Second.
by Supervisor Garamendi. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 401 absent vote. Thank you, Mr. Pack.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Moss, do you need, where you're up next? We'll take a 5-minute break. Okay, reconvene the meeting we'll move to item 21.
Item 21 is from the Administrative Office to adopt a resolution adopting the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Sustainability Plan for Calaveras County.
Good morning, Brian Moss, Deputy County Administrator. Today I'm coming to you with my groundwater policy hat on. This is a topic that has been brought to the board for approximately the last 4 years with occasional updates to let the board know what the State Groundwater Management Act was, why it was in place, and where we were going. We'll talk a little bit about that today as well. In your packet, I put together a kind of a flow chart, if you will, for the board. It has 7 boxes. And if you choose to look at that while we're going through this process, that might be helpful to you. It's a very basic outline from everything from the State Groundwater Management Act inception on down to the Groundwater Authority submitting the groundwater plan to the Department of Water Resources. Peter Martin is with us today from Calaveras County Water District here. CCWD has really been a large part of the lead agency since the inception of the SGMA program in 2014-15. And so he was gracious enough to come on over today to share technical and general information, historical information as well, should it be needed. So again, some of this you'll find to be old hat, but it's an opportunity certainly for a review, and the proposal today, of course, is for the board to consider adoption of the groundwater sustainability plan. So with that said, a little bit of history, like just discussed. 2014, the governor at that time passed and signed off on a couple of bills that resulted in SGMA, or the State Groundwater Management Act of 2015, the act itself. And essentially the act was for the purpose of providing local groundwater sustainability agencies with technical financial assistance for sustainably manage groundwater. You'll recall that we were just coming off a drought. This became a critical issue. Water purveyors as part of the Central Valley Project that are served by everything from Lake Orville, Shasta, and New Maloney's were turning to groundwater to meet their the water demands. What that did is that spotlighted once again our ever retreating groundwater basins. So SGMA requires and did require and does require groundwater sustainability plans, and those groundwater sustainability plans are to be submitted to the Department of Water Resources. This can be done by one GSA, Groundwater Sustainability Agency, and or it could be a combination of coordinated plans inside of a basin or a sub-basin. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the Eastern San Joaquin groundwater basin, and we're going to be talking about the fact that we're the east side GSA. So again, SGMA is requiring the overall management of basins, most specifically in high priority as medium or high priority basins. This board is probably well aware that the Eastern San Joaquin County subbasin has been a state of overdraft for many years pursuant to Department of Water Resources Bulletin 118. Specifically, the subbasin in Calaveras County covers approximately 70 square miles of the county in the northwestern area of the county, and it is designated as a high-priority basin. Why is that important? That's important because we need to get our plan into the Department of Water Resources sooner than the medium and or the low priority basins have to. So that date we'll talk about here in a few minutes, but it is January 31st of 2020. So in keeping with the direction provided by Sigma, the East Side San Joaquin GSA was formed on April 17, 2017. This was the county of Stanislaus. This is a Rock Creek Water District, and this was CCWD. The county later, at a later date, actually opted into it and into the East Side GSA through an amended and restated MOU that is in your packet, and that was action taken by the Board of Supervisors. A little review, again, the basin, as you can see here, this is the entire basin. This is the area, and we'll look at this closer, this is the area of the county that we're concerned about with the East Side GSA, and it also goes into Stanislaus County. Again, state of overdraft. This is a slide from the past that some of you will be aware of. This is actually the old basin identified through the Department of Water Resources as it goes up into Calaveras County. It is actually the sub-basin itself, and that is the 70 square miles that we had just spoke about. So the formation of the East Side GSA certainly allowed for the adoption and drafting of the GSP, which is the plan itself, the Groundwater Sustainability Plan that we're talking about today for adoption. And it's coordinated with the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Authority. And again, if you look at your spreadsheet or your diagram that I provided in your packet, it breaks down how the GSAs to the GSPs and to the Groundwater Authority and how that actually breaks down and how that works, because it can be a little bit confusing when you start throwing these acronyms around. I think it's important to note, and as stated before, this is a joint effort of multiple GSAs, specifically 16. So we are actually, as the East Side GSA, which again is Rock Creek, Stanislaus County, CCWD, and Calaveras County, we are one of 16 GSAs within inside of the entire basin itself. A little bit of background for what the authority has done. They've done the notifications pursuant to Department of Water Resources requirements to develop a GSP, again, Groundwater Sustainability Plan, for the entire basin of which we are a part. If we take a look at the East Side Groundwater Sustainability Agency, or GSA, this is the basin that we're most familiar with. And you'll notice that when this map was put together, this was CCWD only. That would be CCWD and Calaveras County would be the way it'd be identified. And you see, of course, the area in Stanislaus County. This little area here is the Rock Creek Water District. Rock Creek Water District. And actually, they pull their water out of, I want to say, Salt Springs Reservoir, which is a surface water source in Calaveras County, of all things. Are they pulling groundwater currently? No. But they do need to be part of this just simply because of where they're located on the map. And it's a very responsible thing to do on their part. Looking at this a little further, you can see the different agencies here that are represented as part of the 16 GSAs. And here again, once again, you're looking at the East Side GSA. But again, it's all incorporated as part of the larger whole. And here's a slide with, once again, the same idea, but it shows you actually names the specific GSAs that are involved in the GSP. So again, here we are located here. So obviously the East Side GSA, us, we've coordinated with the Groundwater Authority and all of the other GSAs within inside of the basin to draft up a single groundwater sustainability plan for its members. So a draft was actually drafted up this past summer. and you'll see a July 10th, 2019 date on that. That was something that was distributed to the board as a hard copy as a draft several months ago. So hopefully everybody got a copy of that. I know that Supervisor Callaway was looking at hers yesterday. Once again, another depiction of the groundwater basin as a whole, and depicting the east side GSA with inside of that. So a little bit of background as far as what the authority has done. Again, they've done their notices of intent pursuant to water code requirements, and the GWA, or Groundwater Authority, actually recommended that all of its members, all 16, adopt the East San Joaquin East San Joaquin Groundwater Sustainability Plan within its respective jurisdictions, and that was hopefully to be done by January 1st. You'll see in the staff report we had some concerns because the consultant for the GSP had accidentally excluded Calaveras County in some of the document. That was taken care of certainly by County Counsel's office. Thank you, Council, for all your assistance on that. So everybody's aware that today is the day that we're bringing this forward for this board to consider. We're the last ones, the last piece in the puzzle to approve the groundwater sustainability plan. And so we're still okay because the deadline for the Groundwater Authority to submit the final plan is January 31st, 2020. That plan will actually be submitted to the Department of Water Resources likely within the next week. They're not going to wait till the 31st. What I can also tell you is that an addendum was done. I'm sorry, Supervisor Garamendi.
Why are we voting, why do we have to approve it if we're already a member of the GSP?
Because all GSA members need to sign off on this.
So even though we've got a joint power authority?
Even though we are part of it, we do need your official signature on this.
So we delegated, obviously that's just not a normal course of things. So this is different. So I'm just asking why.
Yeah, no, again, my complete understanding of it is that Department of Water Resources is requiring all GSA members within inside of a GSA to sign off. And since we are one of 4 within inside of the east side GSA, we're being asked to provide a resolution saying that our board is in agreement with signing off as part of the overall plan.
Well, obviously we'll go ahead, but it just seems like it sort of undermines the whole JPA concept.
Understood.
To follow up on that, if we don't approve this, the state's already mandated that they will assert their authority in their own fashion.
They will, and we're going to discuss that here in a few minutes. Thank you, Supervisor Stopper. Absolutely, and that's really critical, by the way. That's a critical point. What I can tell you is that amendment that was put in as part of the application was approved by the Groundwater Sustainability Authority, or by the authority during their January 8th meeting. So a little bit of a background here. I'm not going to go through these certainly. You can see the timeline we just kind of briefly discussed through this presentation. This is where we're at today, okay? And again, this is what I was just referring to, the JPA actually accepting the plan, including the modifications as worked through by our council and the council of the authority has been taken care of. Now, to Supervisor Stopper's concern, and it's absolutely a critical one, there are provisions in the law that if in the regulation, if a GSA or GSAs fail to adopt an adequate plan, the State Water Resources Control Board can designate a basin as a probationary basin. And unfortunately, you directly manage groundwater extractions themselves within inside of a jurisdiction such as Calaveras County, which we don't want to happen, certainly. If this occurs, again, they would possibly implement pumping allocations, metering, and monthly reporting We do not want to go down that path. I was having a conversation with Supervisor Callaway the other day, and she did remind me, and correctly so, that there's been concerns at the state for a long time about does the state want to regulate individual wells, okay, drinking water wells. That is not certainly not the intent. We don't want to see that in any way. But certainly there's been that concern, I'm sure at RCRC as well through the years. Again, if we were under a probationary status, we would be looking at costs associated as proposed by the state. We don't want to go down this path, but let's say for some reason Department of Water Resources says, yeah, your plan's not adequate, we don't agree with the entire package. I'm not just talking about the east side, and I'm not even talking about Calaveras County, I'm talking about the whole. They could file a base filing fee of $300 per well, one-time fee. You have different, and these do not, this would add to any one of these, but these do not all add up as a whole, okay? So if you're in an unmanaged area, that's if you don't even adopt a plan, okay? The state can say, we're going to charge $25 per acre foot, plus the 300. If you're in a probationary basin, which means you've submitted the application, you've gone through the steps, and Department of Water Resources, good but not good enough, then you're looking at a $40 per acre foot a charge, plus the 300. De minimis, I actually had an opportunity to sit on the governor's planning task force on Sigma when it first came out, and actually they were talking about the 2 acre feet or less per year at that time, and I tried to get them actually to increase that number to a higher acre feet, but it was unsuccessful. But that was the Department of Plan, that was the Task Force for Planning and Research with the governor's office. So again, we really don't want to go down this path, but this is what the board needs to know, that there are things that, as far as the whole picture is concerned, this is what would potentially happen. Because agriculture tends to use a large quantity of groundwater as well as surface water, therefore the Central Valley Project, that's the whole intent of it. It just gives you an idea of crops, cost per acre foot, and total cost. CCWD, municipal water supply, whatever the acre feet is. Now again, CCWD is actually a surface water source for the most part, which is a non-issue. We want to make sure that we understand that we're not talking about surface water today. We're not talking about the Stanislaus. We're not talking about the Calaveras. We're talking about groundwater. Again, they would be actually paying a large amount of money as well. What's very important to know is that the water code really doesn't say, really basically states that chapter groundwater sustainability plan shall not be interpreted as the superseding land use authority of cities and or counties. So for Calaveras County, that includes our water well construction and destruction ordinance. It was initially approved by the board in 1998 is what I want to say it was, and then a redraft was done 10 years later. And so that ordinance is still in place and implemented through your environmental health department.
Back to that last slide, please.
This one?
Yes.
Yes.
Including the city or county general plan within the overlying basin.
Correct.
Have they updated this to reflect the new general plan passed?
Yes,
Okay.
they have. And once again,
Just making sure that's
once
spoken.
again, council was instrumental in that. I will be honest, I did stay in touch with Peter Maurer through the process, but you know, there were so many moving parts that I mean, he was aware of it, I was aware of it, but certainly council made sure that the authority was aware of it as well. So absolutely, and I think what's important too here is to remember.
Initially, it did say 1996
It
general plan.
did. It did initially say that.
But it was updated.
And the county general plan, and what's really important within the overlying basin, remember that doesn't include the entire county. That only includes the 70 square miles that we talked about of where the basin actually exists in the county today. So I think that's the other important aspect of that. So with that said, what I am proposing today is for the board to consider actually adopting the groundwater sustainability plan through resolution of the board, agreeing with it so that we can go ahead and have our vote, if you will, this board's vote, towards approving, yes, we agree to be, as part of a member of the GSA, we agree with submittal of the plan to the Department of Water Resources. Questions? That's it.
Questions or comments from the board this time? Is there any comments or questions on this from the public?
Boy, this is complicated. I'm Al Segala, Taxpayer Association, and it seems like the word sustainability is used quite often nowadays, and usually it's involved in increasing the size of government or raising taxes. It doesn't need to be that way, I suppose. My definition of sustainability is to have an operation that can continue and not fail. This plan seems to involve taxing people a lot of money based on the amount of water they use. I didn't see anywhere here what that money's going to be spent on. But wouldn't that be a good question, is what are you going to spend this money on? I may be wrong, but I believe the water comes from the sky. And it goes into the lakes, on the ground, it goes in rivers, streams. Some of it goes underground, and they call that water basin. But most of it goes in the rivers and out to the ocean. So, if this really were a sustainability plan, it would involve a method of recharging the aquifers, putting water in the ground. Doesn't that make sense? If you put water in the ground, then you don't have this problem of not being able to pump water out of the ground. Okay, so what do we do now? You have the choice of not approving this. I don't know what that'll get you, probably some kind of fines or put you on some sort of probation. Or approach the groundwater sustainability thing with the question, what do we spend this money on? And what plans are there to recharge the aquifers and eliminate the problem? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Segala.
May I address that?
Why don't we see if there are any other
Okay,
questions
sure.
first, and then we'll answer them. Can we just, do you have a question or comment? Or
Yeah, I'm just here on behalf of Calaveras County Water District. I'm Peter Martin, I'm the manager of Water Resources. I just want to thank Brian Moss and County Council for working over the last month to make those changes to the plan, to make it acceptable. I'm sorry that those particular items were missed, but I think they actually accepted those at the Joint Powers Authority. I did want to mention Supervisor Garamendi's question about the structure of the adoption. Essentially, SGMA, or Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, requires that each groundwater sustainability agency adopt the plan. And the way that the GSA, the Eastside GSA, is structured under a loose MOU leaves all the authority to the individual boards, so the 4 agencies. And so we're asking today for, under that MOU, for each individual agency to adopt the plan so that that can be carried forward to the Joint Powers Authority. That Joint Powers Authority was only created as a cost-saving measure to do one plan for the entire basin. It's been a $2 million plus effort over several years, with a lot of it coming through grant funds from Department of Water Resources. And so it was the most cost-effective way to get towards it. But the Joint Powers Authority in itself doesn't have the authority to actually adopt a plan at a local level. It's supposed to keep that local control with all the agencies. And then again, that's very scary, all the alternatives to going forward with the plan as far as putting fines and penalties on individual well owners. The goal has always been not to have state intervention. I don't think the state wants to intervene on local control of groundwater resources. That was the intent of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. This provides an alternative. And I just want to say that this is just getting us to the starting line. This is a 20-year plan. It's adaptive. There'll be 5-year check-ins. We actually have an annual report due in April, but the Department of Water Resources has 2 years to actually approve the plan. So there's going to be an interim period there where we don't know if the plan's going to get approved. But I encourage the county to stay engaged and involved in this effort as the sole land use authority and the groundwater permitting authority in the county. Whether that be sending folks down to the Joint Powers Authority or the advisory committee there. I participated for several years on the advisory committee as a staff member. Especially now that I've announced my departure from CCWD at the end of the month. It would be really helpful if the county could spare some either an elected official or staff to go start to be involved in that effort long term. It's going to be 20 years, so we're going to be stuck together. So.
And you're leaving and?
Yes, yes, I've accepted a position as a deputy director for the city of Santa Rosa, so we're going to be starting to do a recruitment this week, actually, hopefully, if possible. So.
Oh, well, congratulations. Santa Rosa has a lot of challenges.
That's right.
Ahead of it. Thank you,
Santa
Mr.
Rosa's blessed to have you, Peter.
Yeah.
You're a great asset to CCWD, so.
Thank you, Supervisor Dodd.
Thank you. Mr. Tuffanelli, do you have any questions?
Well, in addition to, sorry for a minute, Will, Jack's comments on this item. This JPA we paid to be a part of. We paid money into it. It's my understanding, though, I'm glad to see this here, but it's my understanding we don't have a seat at the table. We don't have a vote at the table. We're outside of that board, governing board. So them accepting it and not bringing it to us for our acceptance, somebody else is doing our business for us without us not having a seat at the table. But there are other JPAs that do this. If you look at Mountain Valley EMS, that's a GPA. But we brought the RFP to us, and that contract will be coming for our approval too. So it's not outside of it. It's just that all of the other JPAs that we're involved in, we have a seat at the table. We have a member there and have a voting preference in it, so.
Thank you.
And may I jump in real quick? That is going to be something we will come back to the board at a later date, and we've discussed in the past that I certainly would encourage for this board to have a seat at the table.
Okay. And I know Supervisor Mills is very involved in this. I wish he was here for this, but I'd like to get back to any public comments on this item.
I'm Will Moore. I live in Rancho Calaveras down Highway 26, and I've been driving back and forth to Stockton for 20 years or more, and what I see is agriculture moving eastward toward us from San Joaquin County, moving out into the foothills where there is no surface water. So the San Joaquin aquifer extends a small ways into Calaveras County, so we're right at the edge of the aquifer. Well, as those orchards are pumping down that aquifer, our share of it is diminishing. That is an old map, I think, but the thing is, if there's no broader management of this resource, then Calaveras County can't do anything about those orchards pumping down our water supply. And as for, Mr. Segala's comment about water comes from the sky, well, some of that water in that aquifer came from the meltdown of the Ice Age. And it's not coming back. There's no way to replace it once it's pumped out. So, yeah, I don't understand all of this, but I think you should join the broader scale management of this resource, because if you don't, you can be pumped out of your water and not be able to do anything about it.
Thank you.
It looks like the state has you. It's too bad. It seems to me that you're being blackmailed into voting for something that is going to cause trickle-down poverty and cause people not to be able to live in the country. And of course, that's the agenda of the progressives. And, you know, it's reality, but I don't agree with it. I will fight it.
Are there any other questions or comments from my colleagues? Are you going to push the button or not?
I'm going to push the
Okay.
button, but I would like to give
Perhaps-
Mr. Moss the opportunity to answer anything he feels needs to be addressed.
And I have some questions too.
Thank you. Just real quickly to address Mr. Segala's concern, he brought up the term sustainability, and that's exactly what this is about. The idea is to actually get to a point where water in equals water out. That's the idea of sustainability, so that we're no longer in a state of overdraft. Again, that's why Department of Water Resources stated very clearly that this was a high priority basin, meaning that more water's been drafted out of it for the last many years than what's actually going into it. So that is the idea about the sustainability. So you actually really were on target about sustainability, but it's for water in equals water out. And then as far as taxing, I'm not sure where that's really coming in. That would only be in the case of fees associated with wells associated with a probationary status, which is what we're trying to stay out of altogether. I think that addresses it.
Go ahead.
Sure.
I'm last.
Mr. Toffanelli brought up a very good point. We don't have a seat at this table. We, along with Stanislaus and other areas, are uphill. So when it comes to what our wells are doing within our county and what Stanislaus County is doing, we're actually a contributing factor to this groundwater basin. And I, getting a seat at that table and reflecting that and not taking penalties as opposed to what was brought up on the agriculture that's moving closer and closer to the east side is doing in other counties. I think it just needs to be outright said in the future. That's my personal perception of the situation, sir.
And to just quickly address that, that is something that both Supervisor Mills and myself have made it very, very clear to the consultant and to the authority for that very reason. We know that, and the water purveyors that are not within the county that are kind of contributing to the problem will go unnamed at this point. But I can say that there are a few that are likely pulling groundwater even if they have surface water rights. And surface water, whether it's senior or junior water rights, pre versus post 1914. I think that it's clear that, some of that water from a surface standpoint for the CVP may be going down to Southern California. So if Southern California is purchasing the surface water, where are the locals going to get their water?
Mr. Motz, the 11,000, where does that go? What is being done with that?
Thank you. That actually goes to the consultant to be part of the continuing monitoring of groundwater levels through what is called the CASGEM wells. Those are existing wells that I think were primarily put in by CCWD. Am I correct about that, Peter? You want to speak to that?
So CCWD manages CASGEM California, you're going to test me here.
Access testing.
Statewide groundwater elevation management is it's a program statewide. We have a group of volunteer wells on some private properties, and then also some wells that were drilled near Wallace that were done by CCWD several years ago. And those are continually monitored twice a year. They will continue to be monitored, and they're going to be swallowed up as part of a larger monitoring effort across the entire basin. CCWD will continue to pay a consultant to do that, the management of that. But the requirements under Sustainable Groundwater Management Act require that there's a data management system so that all the data becomes public. And so there'll be some maintenance of that, and then also some other things as far as reporting and other things they're going to have to continue beyond this time frame. Again, there's some cost savings associated with partnering with the other 16 GSAs. And so, but yeah, definitely, and then also further with our 4 agencies and our GSA itself, under the MOU, there's some cost sharing there too as well. But yeah, it's just the maintenance long-term of the required monitoring mostly and reporting to the state on the plan.
So the 45,000 is for the east side?
Yeah.
And that's for our portion of the reporting? And is that something that is looked at what will be probably in 2 years?
Yeah, so I would imagine the Joint Powers Authority is going to have to, continue to put out a budget every year and look at what the costs are. And then, obviously, the individual agencies are going to have to determine what they want long-term. So that's another good reason to be a part of that Joint Powers Authority, so that you have a say in that type of discussion on the activities of that entity. Going back on that too, is that our board member Russ Thomas has been on the Joint Powers Authority for a long time. Unfortunately, there's a conflict between the meetings and our meetings, so we haven't been attending. And in the meantime, we've had somebody from Stanislaus County, a staff member, attending on our behalf of that Joint Powers Authority. But they do have a strong preference for electeds as part of that Joint Powers Authority, much like most Joint Powers Authorities. So we would definitely welcome if there's an opportunity to have an elected from Calaveras County be a part of that too. I know that you're going through the motions on, appointing people to those kinds of things, but that would be worthwhile to have somebody from Calaveras County.
Okay, thank you.
Can you stay up there, Peter?
When we have projects, be they agricultural or commercial or residential, within that area, then those 70 square miles, how does this impact those projects?
My understanding is it may not necessarily impact those projects, but I do know that Peter's office will be always notifying the authority when those kind of projects go through, so that it's part of the database.
So would it limit the wells or limit the depth of wells?
It should not. It should not do that. I mean, the idea is not to take the authority, our authority, this board's authority for Calaveras County away. The idea is to just keep it monitoring. I asked the consultant an interesting question yesterday too, just kind of on the same realm of this whole idea of the de minimis, which was in one of those charts. If you're over 2 acre-feet a year on an existing well, let's say, for agricultural purposes, I don't care if it's running cattle or if it's you're growing almonds. How does the state even know you're pulling over 2 acre-feet per year? And she actually stated, well, that's a really interesting question. I'm not sure if they know how to do that. So we wouldn't be involved in that kind of thing, but I just kind of brought that up as what happens. But back to that, can you restate that?
Well, okay, we have a project, which we had years ago. And wells were an issue. And I remember
specifically.
A
yes.
farmer from Linden or somewhere coming in and saying that he draws a lot of the water from that basin.
Right.
So, I mean, if we have another developer and they want to put in whatever subdivision, however, is there going to be a restriction? I mean, we say that.
Yeah.
But
Not
the way I see this going.
I have a simple answer
is
for that,
there-
Brian, if you
Yes, sir.
will. As it's written right now, it does not supersede our land use
understand
authority.
that. I understand that.
And I
That's
think,
not what
and
I'm
and I
saying.
think, but I
Thank
think
you.
Supervisor Callaway's point is really valid as well in terms of what's going to happen in the future and what's to prevent our residents, whether they be agricultural or just simple domestic use, from being quote unquote penalized. And that's again why it's important for this board to have a representative as part of the overall JPA. And so, and I highly recommend that. So, it's not, Supervisor Stopper is absolutely correct. There's nothing in the law right now in provision in the water code that says that they're going to penalize or they're going to take any other actions, other than that we need to make sure that, our planning department reports these things to the authority.
So every time we have a new well,
Not a domestic well. This would be more of a large project. Maybe it's a subdivision and they're using groundwater and they're going to use over 2 acre-feet per year. That would probably be a trigger, okay? But an individual domestic well, no. And this board's well aware that really the highest use of water in California is not domestic, it's agricultural.
right?
There are growth estimates. There are growth estimates incorporated into the plan, so there was some numbers that were discussed as far as additional use going down the 20-year horizon. And that's kind of where Mr. Moss had mentioned the in and out and the budgeting of the water. There are projects planned mostly in San Joaquin County to offset that deficit, but the deficit included forecasting out additional water use in places like Calaveras County long-term from the groundwater basin. So, and those are in line with things like Calaveras County's growth estimates, Department of Finance, and also the Urban Water Management Plan from CCWE. So.
Okay, Mr. Stoppage, Mr. Garamendi.
Yes, thank you. I just finished reading Mark Herrick's book, Dripland, which is about groundwater sustainability over break. And your point about the highest and best use of water is a broad and open debate in the state of California, and it has been for a century, and I'm sure will continue. But my question is, is there anybody exporting groundwater from Calaveras County?
Absolutely not that we're aware of. Now, probably 20 years ago, this board directed me to put together the groundwater, I want to say it was a groundwater management ordinance. And in that ordinance, if somebody decides that they want to pump water out of Calaveras County, out of groundwater, and put it in a trough and run it to Stanislaus or run it to San Joaquin or run it anywhere else beyond a geopolitical boundary, they cannot do so without this board's approval. This board actually issues the permit or okays the permit. So that application would go to your planning department. That planning department would bring that here, and that would be this board's decision as to whether or not to even allow that to happen.
Because I know that in other counties, they've recently adopted such ordinances, such as Merced County. We don't want that happening here. So if you would take it upon yourself to review that, make sure it's current. Any changes, I would like to see it, but if it's solid, it's solid. I just don't want anybody pumping and selling it across the line as surface water, period.
We absolutely agree, and I will pull that ordinance up for you. I drafted it many years ago, and Supervisor Callaway was on the board at the time.
I'm going to let Supervisor Tuffanelli go first.
Yeah, well, to some of the points that were being made here before my question, I think at some time in the future, once these monitoring wells are monitored and they get some value and what's going on in levels, if there's a future development that's going to use groundwater, probably part of the requirement would be that they have to show they're able to recharge that for whatever use they're saying. What's their reuse having to be recharged in? But my question is, when you talk about 2 acre feet and what's being said, there's, without going into any names, there are a number of smaller water agencies, one in my district area that has several ground wells that they supply water from. It's all groundwater. And I don't see their name on here. How is this going to affect those agencies, such like this one, that most people in that area rely upon that groundwater, and they're pumping more than 2 acre feet?
Absolutely they are. And, it's interesting because we highly recommended, and so did CCWD, I want to say, is that water district be part of this. They chose not to be part of this. What that means to them is they don't have a seat at the table. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. They don't have, they really don't have a seat at the table to help direct the policy as to where Sigma is going to go over the next 20 years.
Does this GSP cover them?
It does.
It does cover them?
It does.
Okay. I wanted to make sure.
They've been
that we
reached
did.
out to, sir.
I know they've been reached out to. I'm well aware of that, but I just wanted to bring up that, and Peter maybe could answer some of it, that it could affect them, and they don't have a seat at the table, and they are pumping well over 2 acre feet.
Yes, absolutely they are.
And they're in this basin, they're the outer reaches of this basin.
Yeah, this plan provides them with coverage, for that area. We've made some attempts to reach out to them, other than the fact that we'll be reporting on their behalf on probably what they're drawing out of the basin. There's not much different in how they operate their facilities. And they were considered, and their future growth and current use was considered as part of this plan and built into the model that was put into the plan as well. So.
And just a comment, just kind of not really on the topic, but there has been a question as to, are they drawing water from the basin, which they are over, or are they actually pulling water from one of the tertiary channels? Because of the amount of water they're pulling, we certainly know that the Toyon water system, and you see that where the old lumber plant or mill was, down at Toyon, is pulling significant water. That's why you see an elevated clear well.
Yeah.
I think that pumps over 300 gallons a minute, and that's just because that's all the pump's able to pump.
Well, there was also a question in CCWD, since they took over Wallace Lake Estates, and that's groundwater. That water is actually pulling from the lake. At one time years ago, when we had a development in front of us for their phase 2, East Bay came here and was saying that that's their water they're drawing off of. I don't know if you were around then, but
I wasn't, but I'm aware of, that there's quite a bit of subsurface flow below Comanche, but
that is part of this basin, so.
Yeah. And what's really interesting, this board's well aware of, we have areas down like Campo Seco where we don't have any water at all, even though it sits on the side of Comanche Reservoir. And why is that? Because it's geologically dependent. The water will not move through that greenstone. So just because the water is right next to you doesn't necessarily mean you can get it. We have 1,000-foot dusters down there. In other words, 1,000-foot wells that don't have any water in them.
I just want to touch on the issue that Supervisor Garamendi brought up, and what you said, they have to come to the board. That issue has not been tested because it was a definite difference of opinion between CCWD and Calaveras County.
It was.
And, if I'm remembering
You're
correctly.
remembering
And then
correctly, yes.
until that happens, and we go to court, it's who owns the water within, the rights of the water within Calaveras County. Manages that. CCWD says they do, and the County of Calaveras says it's inured to the people of Calaveras through the county. So, hopefully we're never tested on it for the reasons that Supervisor Garamendi mentioned, but Peter can come to us till the cows come home. And CCWD said, no, it's ours to manage that way. Then, it's just an old history lesson of Calaveras County. And
I'm under no illusion that the county is the permitting authority for groundwater wells. And don't know if you have an export ordinance, but a good example is San Joaquin County had an aquifer recharge and storage project with North San Joaquin through East Bay Mud. They had to change their ordinances to allow for East Bay Mud to access that water under it's called the DREAM project, and I can't remember the acronym. There's so many acronyms associated with groundwater apparently, but so the county had to weigh very heavily whether or not they wanted to allow for East Bay Mud to come in and perhaps have a role in the management of that groundwater basin. So, yeah, an example would be that San Joaquin County just went through that exercise within the last few years, and they were the authority that determined whether or not water could be exported from the groundwater basin.
And also, just touching on Supervisor Callaway's comments, I can't speak for what it is today. I know in the past, water law stated that nobody owned groundwaters of the state, unless you're an adjudicated basin. Okay? So really what that comes down to is most of our wells are hard rock wells. Nobody actually owns that groundwater. We used to deal with that in environmental health, because somebody may have a well that's 300 feet and somebody else comes by and they drill one that's 500 feet and they say, oh, they're taking all my water. So from a water law standpoint, there was really nothing that anybody could do, because nobody actually owns that, at least the last time I saw the water law regarding this issue.
And I'm going to wrap this item up. If there are no questions or comments anymore from the board, I would like a motion. I wish Mr. Mills was here. I know he would like the privilege to do that, but adopt the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Garamendi, second by Supervisor Tuffanelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes on a 401 absent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Good luck, Peter.
Yes,
Yeah, Peter, thank you.
absolutely. I like the city manager of Santa Rosa. He's pretty impressive.
Well, hopefully it's me,
I'd like to move to item 22. Madam Clerk?
Item 22 is from Human Resources to introduce and, after a waiver of the reading requirements, an ordinance adopting changes consistent with the modified Memorandum of Understanding with Service Employees International Union Local 1021 for certain elected officials and authorize summary publication of the ordinance.
Chair, members of the board, Judy Hawkins, Human Resources and Risk Director, and I am bringing before you today the introduction of an ordinance to update the benefits for certain elected officials, bringing them their benefits in line with those that we have already brought forward for other unrepresented groups. And we are updating their health benefits. We are also bringing their base salary up to giving them a 2% COLA, and then also increasing the dollar-for-dollar match for the 457 plan from $25 per month to $50 a month.
Any comments from the public or questions from the public on this item? And so the public comment, bring it back to the board. If there's no comment, I would like a motion.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Garamendi, second by Supervisor Tuffanelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 401 absent vote of the board.
Thank you.
And go away.
Marita, can you turn on your microphone, please?
Thank you. 401 absent. Yeah, not what I said.
It said 4-1, which means.
Oh, got it. All right. Sorry.
Item 23 is from Human Resources to introduce, after a waiver of reading requirements, an ordinance adopting changes consistent with the modified Memorandum of Understanding with Service Employees International Union Local 1021 for the Board of Supervisors and authorize summary publication of the ordinance.
All right, I'm bringing before you the introduction of the ordinance modifying the benefits for the Board of Supervisors. This will change the healthcare contribution for the board, which will bring it in line with those of the other unrepresented groups. And then also changing the county contribution toward the 457 plan from $25 a month to $50 a month. And this ordinance will take effect 30 days after board adoption, which a resolution will be brought back before you.
Okay, any comments from the board? Any comments from the public on this item? No public comment, I'll bring it back to the board. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion by Supervisor Garamendi, second.
Second.
By Supervisor Toffenelli, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, passes on a 401 absent vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Judy. Move to item 24, board assignments. The clerk very kindly showed the ones that we were on last year in 2019. Are there any changes to? Oh, it shows here East Side San Joaquin, GSA. That is on there.
Yeah, Dennis was on it.
Right, and Ben's the alternate. Okay.
Madam Chair, I would like to serve on the Debt Advisory Committee.
All right.
Who's on there now?
Dennis. Debt advisory meets just sporadically on an as-needed basis. Mr. Toffenelli, you had something?
Yeah, I feel a little bit uncomfortable with Dennis not being here. It's not his own accord going through and making changes that affect him. Not to say I'm not in agreement with Mr. Garamendi being on there, but him not here to say anything in his defense or what he would like to see, or maybe he would like to be on a different committee. Perhaps we could postpone this till next week.
We could.
Fine, is there
could do that.
any?
The appointments overall?
Yeah, all the
Yeah,
important.
just the whole thing.
Just so he has input in
Has
it.
input.
He may want to sit on something else, he may be one off of something else, and we have to decide who's going to sit on it and what have you.
Okay. If there's no problem, can we?
Like a motion.
Okay. May I have a motion, please?
I would move that we postpone this for a week.
Okay, go ahead. Did you want to second that?
I would like to give an opportunity for
I
public
will,
comment.
I'll do that. Thank you. Okay, I have a motion. I don't have a second. Is there any public comment on this? I can still take a motion in a second and then comment. Yes.
Choosing the committees that the supervisors are going to be on with one absent member of the Board of Supervisors is wrong. And particularly because legally, he had to be someplace else. It wasn't like he went to a party or something like that. And you guys are taking advantage of that. And I think all of these committees should be done with all 5 supervisors present.
That's what we're doing. I have a motion from Supervisor Toffenelli. Do I have a second? Did you want to second it?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you. A second by Supervisor Stopper to move this item to next week when Mr. Mills will be with us. Are all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No, passes on a 401 absent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tom. Looks like too many meetings to me. Go ahead. Item 25.
Item 25 is from the Clerk of the Board of Supervisors to adopt the 2020 Board of Supervisors meeting calendar. The calendar that's in your packet includes the second and fourth Tuesdays of each month, including the third Tuesday, as we did the last year, which would be regular business, but also reserved for items that would be lengthy or that we think would need some more discussion. Go ahead.
No.
Oh, the differences would be that in the month of November and December, the meetings would be on the first, second, and third Tuesdays in November, and in December on the second and third Tuesdays.
Is the meetings in June, is that for budget?
Yes, it is.
And are we going to have another one in September?
My understanding is that is anticipated to only be one day on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alt. Any questions on the agenda? Okay, any comments from the public on our calendar for 2020? Okay, may I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Supervisor Stopper.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Tuffanelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes on a 401 vote. Item 26.
Item 26 is from the Clerk of the Board of Supervisors to adopt a resolution rescinding Resolution 09-035 and establishing 1- and 2-year term lengths and create a staggering of term expirations for the Calaveras County Parks and Rec Commission. So currently, the Parks and Rec Commission members all expire every year. And after attending their meeting in November, they expressed the desire to have their meeting, their term length extended to 2 years, and so this also creates a staggering. It facilitates not everybody expiring at once. It facilitates being able to have a meeting the first month of the new year. There's several benefits to it, and they are in concurrence with this recommendation.
Any concerns from the board, questions? Any comments from the public on this? I'll bring it back to the board. Diane, does this mean that the ones that go to 21 will automatically go to 21?
Yes, approving this item will affect the next item and the appointments that are made, and if this is approved, then when I read that into the recommendation, that would be
okay.
What would be established.
If there's no questions, I'll have a motion.
I'll move this item.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Tuffanelli, second by Supervisor Stopper. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes on a 401 absent vote. Thank you.
Item 27 is from the Clerk of the Board of Supervisors, the appointment of applicants to serve on various committees, commissions, advisory boards, and county service areas. So this is the first round of appointments for the calendar year. I think the way we normally do it is I'll read into the record the vacancies that we have applications for and who the applications are from. And then if you want to separate any out, we can do that. Or you can act on them all at the same time.
I'd like to act on them all at the same time unless there's any concerns. Go ahead.
Okay. So the first is for the Ag Advisory Committee. We have one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/22 for a District 2 rep. We have an application from Doug Josies, who is an incumbent. We have one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/22 for a District 5 rep. And we have an application from John Roby, who is an incumbent. For the Altaville Cemetery District, we have one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/23 for member 2. That application is received from Paula Brolio, who is an incumbent. One vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/23 for the member 3. We have an application from Rex Whittle, who is the incumbent. And one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/23 for member 4. And we have an application from Lorena Darby, who is an incumbent. For the Area 12 Agency on Aging Advisory Council, there's one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/21 for member 5, and we have an application from Richard Corvello, and his application is recommended by Area 12 for appointment. Central Sierra Economic Development District, there's one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/21 for a public member, and we have an application from Kathy Galino. For the Children and Families Commission, first 5, we have a vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/22 for the Health and Human Services Agency Director, and we have an application from Kristen Stranger, who is the incumbent. And one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/22 for a recipient of project services, and an application is submitted by Crystal Goldberg, who is the incumbent. On the Fish and Game Commission, we have one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/21 for a District 3 representative, and we have an application from Ron Severud, who is an incumbent, and one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/21 for District 5, and an application from Louis Olivas, who is an incumbent. The Hardwood Advisory Committee, there's one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/22 for an Ag Advisory Committee rep, and there is an application from Stuart Mast, who is the incumbent. On the IHSS Advisory Committee, there is one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/21 for a past or present provider of service. We have an application from Marty Crane, who is an incumbent. The Law Library Board of Trustees, one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/20 for an attorney or general public member, and we have an application from Michael Hatfield, who is the incumbent. The Mental Health Board makes the following recommendations for vacancies on terms expiring 12/31/22 for general public representatives 1, 2, and 5. Nancy Heitschu, who is an incumbent, Mark McCorkadale, and Steve Lindsay. The Parks and Rec Commission, based on the previous item, one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/20 for a District 2 representative, Zerrell McDaniel as an incumbent. One vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/21 for a District 3 representative, Mark Hall, who is an incumbent. One vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/20 for a District 4 representative, Donald Kurtz, incumbent. One vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/21 for a District 5 representative, Clarissa Powell, incumbent. And one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/20 for the San Andreas Rec and Park representative, and an application has been received from Paul Steck, who is an incumbent. The last is the Prevent Child Abuse Council. They make the following recommendations for appointment for 6 vacancies with terms expiring 12/31/21. Community Volunteer, application from Heather O'Leary, incumbent. Early Childhood Prevention and Treatment, Margaret Rawlings, incumbent. Public and Private Prevention and Treatment, Amy Hasselwander, incumbent. Civic Organizations, Farrellyn Roberts, incumbent. Community-Based Social Services, Prevention and Treatment, Elizabeth Gilbert, incumbent. Mental Health Services, Prevention and Treatment, Roland Dillard. And Community Volunteer, Pilar Coppers.
Okay, any comments from the board on any of these? Any comments from the public on any of these board appointments? I'll bring it back to the board. I'd like to, if there's nothing pulled, I have a motion on all the appointments.
If no one has anything to pull, I would like to move it in its entirety.
Motion by Supervisor Stopper.
I'll second.
You know, Garamendi sure
He's-
is quiet.
He's recovering from his prior year.
Second by Supervisor Tuffanelli, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes on a 4-0-1 absent vote. Thank you. Like to Move to any supervisor comments?
In compliance with AB 1234, chaptered as Government Code Section 53232.3D, board members shall provide brief reports on meetings they attended at the expense of the local agency at the next regular meeting of the legislative body. This report is required to include meetings attended for which there has been expense reimbursement, mileage, meals, lodging, etc., but may also, at the board member's discretion, include any other meeting attended by the supervisor on behalf of the county.
Does any supervisor have something they would like to announce? I mean, you're going to a lot of crab feeds. Is there any more you're going to that we're missing out on?
Yeah, I didn't attend any board meetings because of the holidays. I do have a CPPA meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. here in San Andreas. I did attend most of all the crab feeds. There's another one for San Andreas Fire on February 1st, so if you haven't got your tickets, you can buy them at the station. So that's all I have to report at this time, other than Happy New Year's.
Thank you. Mr. Garamendi, nothing?
That's the report, Madam Chair.
Mr. Stopper?
I would like to, I've attended a few meetings, but not at the cost of the county, and there's nothing substantial to report from those meetings since our last meeting in December. But I also would like to remind the board on a poll and something that's come up again, that we had talked about bringing back animal services and looking at that, and that issue's come up. So as we move forward, you know, that
I
just a
believe,
consideration.
Mr. Alt's bringing back, he had 6 months in February or March, Mr. Alt?
We'll have some discussion on the January 28th agenda about recommendations from the ad hoc committee to potentially consider that as sort of part of their responsibility, and we'll also have a follow-up report. My apologies. Did you catch that?
No, I didn't hear any of it.
On January 28th, we'll have a report out from the ad hoc, and it's one
Yeah.
of the suggestions of the ad hoc for consideration, and we'll also have a more thorough report following that as well.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. CAO, do you have anything?
I do not.
Council?
Can I just add 1 second to Mr. Alt? If you don't know, the rest of the board and for the people out there, the ad hoc committee will be on the January 28th, and our report will be coming out on the January 28th meeting. So that's been long awaited. I know other supervisors have asked several times about it, but we have some exciting things to report out.
Council? Mr. Gay, thank you. Ms. Severu? Nothing. Okay, if there's, oh, Susan, thank you. Nothing to report. Okay, am I supposed to ask the public if they have anything? Got it. Okay, this meeting is adjourned. I hit the gavel.